For more now on Canada's election and what it all means, let's bring in our panel. Joining us from Calgary is Stephen Carter. He's a campaign strategy specialist. From Ottawa via Skype is Fred DeLorey. He's a strategist for the Conservative Party. Here with us in the studio is Eric Miller. He's a global fellow with the Canada Institute at the Wilson Centre. And from Toronto, Tarek Fatah is a journalist, author and former candidate for the NDP party. Thanks to all of you for being with us. Stephen Carter, let me start with you in Calgary. As our reporter just said, Justin Trudeau should have coasted easily to victory. But if we look at what happened here, 4 years ago, he coasted to victory with a big majority. Now he wins again, but this time he will lead a minority government. Still, he regards that as a very clear mandate from the Canadian people. This is what he had to say. Let's watch this.
You are sending our Liberal team back to work, back to Ottawa with a clear mandate. We will make life more affordable. We will continue to fight climate change. We will get guns off our streets, and we will keep investing in Canadians.
So, Stephen, what did you make of the outcome of the election?
Well, Canadians didn't so much choose forward as they chose to stand still. This was an election where most Canadians didn't seem to like either choice, and they chose tepidly to keep the status quo rather than choosing Andrew Scheer, who they rejected even in the face of all the Liberal scandals. So it wasn't really an election where people were making a choice for the positive. They were just more or less choosing the lesser of two evils, and they chose to keep the Liberals and the incumbent Liberals in place. Out here in Alberta, I'll tell you, the negativity towards the Liberals is something that's really going to be seen and heard in the coming months and years. It'll be interesting to see how Prime Minister Trudeau manages that, given that there's such a polarization between the prairie provinces and the more populous provinces of British Columbia, Ontario, and Quebec.
Fred DeLorey, choosing the lesser of two evils. This was how the leader of the Conservative Party, Andrew Scheer, responded to the results of the election. Let's listen.
After the 2015 election, when Justin Trudeau looked unstoppable, when all the pundits and experts said it was the beginning of another Trudeau dynasty, that he would have 8 or even 12 years in power. But tonight, Conservatives have put Justin Trudeau on notice. And Mr. Trudeau, when your government falls, Conservatives will be ready and we will win.
So, Fred, before the election, the Conservatives were asking very hard questions about Trudeau's record, about the personal scandals he's faced, about allegations that his aides had interfered in a criminal case, but still they failed to unseat him. So what went wrong for the Conservatives?
Well, there's a lot we have to look at as a party and as on the campaign team on what happened there. We did feel that we had a good chance to win the most seats anyways, if regardless if it was going to be a minority or majority government. And it didn't work. I think there has to be a lot of self-reflection there. At the same time, though, I think the party needs to be pleased where they are. They did bring Trudeau down to a minority, which is rare in Canadian politics to bring someone down to a minority after a majority. It doesn't happen that often. And at the same time, regarding all these scandals like the SNC-Lavalin, which is a potentially massive corruption scandal within the government, now that it's a minority, Mr. Trudeau won't be able to use his majority that he used to have in Commons committees to shut down investigations. So it's possible now we may really be able to get to the bottom of this if the NDP and the Bloc Quebecois do the right thing and allow these investigations to actually happen now. Because if you combine all those parties and the votes they have in committee, you'll be able to open up this investigation and get to the root of this.
All right, let me go to Tarek and talk about the New Democratic Party. That's on the left, of course, of the Canadian political spectrum. It's led by Jagmeet Singh. They got 24 seats. It was a loss from the last election, but it does put him in a powerful position if he joins with the Liberals to form a government. This is what Jagmeet Singh had to say. Let's listen to this.
We are going to make sure that the energy that we built over this campaign, the excitement that we built, and the focus that we put on people's struggles continues, and so that we can play a constructive and positive role in the new parliament that Canadians have chosen.
So, Tarek, how does Jagmeet Singh and the NDP now use this power that they just have got after this election? I mean, what kind of role do you see the NDP playing?
Well, the NDP will have to come to the understanding that the people that Jagmeet Singh is talking about outrightly rejected them in one of the areas where it should have done pretty well, which is the Greater Toronto area. Out of 55 seats, 47 seats went to the Liberal Party. Jagmeet Singh couldn't even win a single seat in the region where he used to be a member of the provincial parliament, where his brother is an MP. And it's very dismal news. The point is that there is no one Canada anymore. The Bloc Quebec has literally cleaned the slate of New Democrats. They left with just one MP over there. It is a separate, completely zone because it's led, and the majority of the members of parliament from Quebec belong to the sovereignist, separatist Bloc Quebecois. If you go to Saskatchewan and Alberta, there is not even a sign of the Liberal Party there. So the Prairie provinces are a different Canada. And they together are what, 33 and about 10 seats, 43. The GTA, which is 55 seats, is a completely different place than Eastern Canada. And the New Democrats need to figure one thing out. How was it that the last leader from Quebec sat around and undermined the leadership of Jagmeet Singh while this was going on? And until and unless the New Democrats get back to the basics of what Ed Broadbent, or perhaps I don't give too many marks to Jack Layton other than that he got a sweep in Quebec. But the fundamental understanding of the working poor and the working well needs to be related to, and they can't. They seem to have lost out in cities where Ed Broadbent used to win. Sid Ryan was not even allowed to run as a candidate. Toronto Danforth, where Jack Layton used to be an MP, Olivia Chow's seat, every seat that one could expect the NDP to win was wiped out. So there's a big loss for the NDP, no matter what Jagmeet Singh says. Getting wiped out from Saskatchewan, the birthplace of the NDP and CCF. There's nothing there.
Okay, Eric, to the point that Tarek was talking about, that there isn't one Canada anymore. In fact, there was a piece in a Toronto newspaper this morning which said that this election, the outcome of this election, is a reflection of a divided nation.
Yeah, and we have seen these tendencies from time to time. Canada is one of the most decentralized countries in the world, and you have seen in this vast geography many different views of how the country should be moved forward. What you are seeing is on the prairie provinces in Alberta and Saskatchewan, you are seeing a rise of separatist tensions and certainly concerns about a different way forward. Climate change has emerged as a real flashpoint between those more in the east who've said no to new pipelines and those in the west who have energy, who need to move it to markets in Asia and elsewhere. And so certainly the country is facing a challenge of how does one move things forward. But this is not something where it's hit a new low. Lest we forget that in Quebec there were 2 referendums about separation, and Canada and Canadians do find a way to soldier on despite their differences, and they do find a way to see the Federation evolve.
You know, Eric, just a few years ago, Justin Trudeau was seen not just as an idol in Canada, he was seen as an idol around the world. So he emerges from this election victorious, in a sense, but bruised.
Yes.
But the question is, how bruised is he?
I think he's quite bruised, and it depends on where you look at it. So domestically, going into the campaign, what you saw was pollsters said, which is a bigger factor? Is it disappointment with Justin Trudeau, or is it dislike of Andrew Scheer? And we found that people were more willing to put aside their disappointment and vote for Justin Trudeau in the areas in Quebec and the Maritimes and in Ontario where it mattered. Internationally, his star is very much diminished. Certainly the disastrous trip to India is something that has left the relationship in that part of the world in need of deep repair, and certainly the blackface, brownface scandal has certainly sullied his image very significantly. So he will go forth in the world as someone who is diminished, but with big ideas, and with, if she is reappointed, Chrystia Freeland is a very capable foreign minister to really run the plays on foreign policy.
Stephen Carter, was it these personal scandals that the Prime Minister encountered during his term in office that cost him so many seats, or was there something a lot more wrong in the country?
Well, there's an economic situation that's developing out in Western Canada that's quite tricky. You have the world shifting away from our resource-based economy towards more of a renewables-based economy, and it's going to cause some chaos. And the Prime Minister has been unable to manage that or to set expectations, and he's got provincial leaders who are taking advantage of it. So he's got a much stronger provincial opposition than even his opposition has been within the House of Commons. As a result, he's taking body blow after body blow out here, and it's very difficult for him. He needs to stop playing the role of Prime Minister and actually start leading as a Prime Minister. And it's going to be very tricky to do in an environment where he not only has the Conservatives in opposition, the Bloc Quebecois and the New Democrats, he also has provincial premiers like Jason Kenney and Scott Moe in Saskatchewan who are actively leading a resistance against him.
Fred, do you see a scenario where the NDP joins forces with the Liberals to form a majority in Canada, in the government there, pushing the Liberals further to the left?
I don't see a formal coalition happening. The Liberals don't need it. There's certain, I think they'll go piece by piece on each bill and find allies in the House on that. The NDP will help them on some, the Bloc will help them on some, and if it's a good bill, I'm sure the Conservatives will support it if it helps the economy. So I don't think there'll be a formal coalition, but it is certainly a concern that a lot of the times when the Liberals go looking for help, they'll be going to the NDP, and the NDP will be asking for a big bag of money, and it'll be in a very, very expensive deal with them for each piece that they try to get through. We've seen it in the past, not long ago, in the early 2000s, they did make a lot of deals with the NDP when they were in a minority situation, and it was billions upon billions of dollars of spending, and that concerns a lot of people because the only way to pay for that is either to raise taxes through the roof or to cut transfers to the provinces or other services. So it could be very concerning and very detrimental to the nation's treasury if the Liberals and the NDP work together too closely.
Tarek, what are the issues at the top of the NDP agenda where they could use this power that they have right now to get through Parliament?
Well, let me make this clear. This same argument was used from the 1930s and the 40s and the 50s, that the country's physicians were up in arms against healthcare. That exactly the same argument was leveled. Oh, who's going to pay for it? Now, I've been twice out of cancer treatments, and I don't know who paid for it, but some of my brothers and sisters did pay for my treatment. And that's what a civilized society is. Now, if we can't have dental care or pharmacare, and we still want to have a country in which a prime minister could get away with blackface, another leader gets away without telling people that he's actually an American citizen, it just tells you that the level of the debate is not about full disclosure or talking to people like the Green leader or I would say even Jagmeet Singh were talking as humans talk. But when I would listen to Mr. Scheer or Trudeau Jr., they sounded like robots. And I can tell you on the street, people are tired. I mean, it's one thing that on the last 2-3 days, Mr. Scheer could not say yes or no to the fact that he had allegedly hired a company to destroy Max Bernier. Now, all of this accounts for something. Why is the scripted note come to substitute what a leader has to say? We knew how Joe Clark used to talk. We knew Ed Broadbent's views. We knew Brian Mulroney used to do that. Suddenly we are talking from idiot boxes. And people are sick and tired of being timed at this a fake smile that comes up every sort of a minute and a half. And Scheer blew it. Anyone other than Mr. Scheer could have won this election. But he couldn't make an impact on the electorate anywhere.
Right.
He just didn't have the personality to win.
Okay, Fred, you want to respond to that?
Well, look, I think, Mr. Scheer this was his first campaign, and he did bring Mr. Trudeau down to a minority. I do agree with a lot of what Tarek said, though, about being more personal and not sticking to scripts. I do think a lot of our leaders did that, and I think it would have been better off if we really hear what they really felt and meant. And hopefully that's what we'll be seeing going forward, and hopefully lessons come from this campaign about that.
Eric, looking at the arithmetic in the Parliament right now, how do you see this turnout for the major parties? I mean, is it going to be a piece-by-piece thing?
Well, certainly there is a desire for change. Yeah. As I said, it was the choice between dislike versus disappointment. And so you are going to see potentially a leadership review in the Conservative Party. It's not clear, but there are already supporters of a moderate Conservative named Peter MacKay who are positioning him as a potential successor to Mr. Scheer, and this will work itself out over the days and weeks ahead. You will certainly see Mr. Trudeau have to look very hard at his choices and his future. But where does Justin Trudeau draw his analogies from? This is very similar to the situation that his father faced in 1972, where his father swept into power with a great deal of adulation and excitement in 1968, and then was reduced to a situation of a much narrower minority in 1972. And so in his life experience, he will likely see we will soldier on and try to remake the brand and come back for a majority a couple of years later. And so there's going to be a lot of pieces at play, and the opposition is very divided in the House of Commons, so it will take considerable work for them to really bring Justin Trudeau down.
Stephen Carter, I'm going to look at one of the specific issues, an issue that generated quite a bit of controversy in Canada, and that's the expansion of the Trans Mountain oil pipeline. Can you see that expansion now go ahead, given that the New Democratic Party has a role in this and they oppose the pipeline expansion?
Well, I can't see it not going forward. As mentioned, the Conservatives have the opportunity to support the Liberals on just about any bill. And frankly, the Trans Mountain expansion doesn't require any more input from the legislature. It is approved. It has been approved by Cabinet. It's been challenged by court reviews, but those reviews have not placed an injunction on the construction. So the construction is proceeding. And I would expect Trans Mountain to continue its building process until such time as the Prime Minister decides to sell it, which may come in the next few months, or it may take a couple of years until after the actual construction. The bottom line, though, is that the pipeline will be built. It is under construction now. There is no need for intervention from the House of Commons, and I would imagine that both the Conservatives and the Liberals would be united in not going backwards on that pipeline. So we should be able to see shipments, I believe it's in 2022 that pipeline would be in place and shipping oil.
Fred, do you agree with that this pipeline construction will go ahead, nothing will stop it now?
Well, I'm hopefully very hopeful that it does, I'd agree with Stephen, and I think it's going to move forward. But at the end of the day, the Liberals could make some kind of a deal if they feel they need to do it with the NDP to block it. But I don't see that happening. I do think this can go forward.
One other issue, Tarek, and that is Justin Trudeau promised during his first term that he would improve relations with the indigenous people of Canada, but looking at the pipeline again, at least 6 groups, indigenous people, have complained that they were not consulted. How does Trudeau handle that now?
I would suggest that the pipeline be used as a single first step to reunite this country. You know, it is in the interest of the Indigenous, Aboriginal, First Nations people. Economic development is the greatest aid we can do to get the First Nations involved into it. There are pressures from different sides who unfortunately use the First Nation card to stop expansion of economic development. There is no replacement, no other better way to bring the Maritimes and British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec, and the Prairie provinces together as a pipeline. This would be what the CN train did, or how the Trans-Canada railway line did to us. We need someone to come forward and instill a sense of patriotism. People say it's populism and all that. There's nothing wrong with it. I like to be part of a country in which people have hope, not cynicism. And why should we get oil from Saudi Arabia? Why on earth would Quebec want oil that is shipped on the oceans? Don't they understand that the oil tankers leak in the ocean? I would like to face the environmentalists and say, getting oil from 6,000 miles away and getting oil from your own backyard, isn't it preferable? We can manage environmental controls, make sure there are no leaks, like no other country on earth. And in the oceans where the Saudi oil is coming to our lands, there is no control. You can spill anything you want in the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific, and nobody is going to charge you with any crime. So let's use, I would appeal to the Prime Minister and the Conservatives, if the NDP doesn't want to come together with it, tell them, find some other excuse. But we need something to bring Ontario, Quebec, the Prairie Provinces and the Maritimes and British Columbia as one country. For heaven's sake, we need a strong Canada so that the rest of the world can understand what a beautiful place this is, what a nice family we are.
Eric, another challenge, trade relations with the United States. It's been almost a year now since the leaders of the United States, Canada and Mexico agreed in principle to the USMCA. Right now, it's at a standstill. What implications does that have for Canada?
So right now, the Canadian government is watching very closely the negotiations between Ambassador Lighthizer and the Democrats in the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives will have to initiate the bill because it is a money bill.
Right.
And so they're down to 4 issues, pharmaceuticals, enforcement, labor, and environment. And Canada is not playing its cards. What they've said is our process will move at the same pace as the US process. And that will mean that they will not have to go back and make any further amendments if that's so agreed. And it also keeps the pressure on the United States to show that they can actually pass this trade agreement. And so for Canada, having a trade agreement with the United States is absolutely fundamental and is something that most political analysts and political leaders in Canada support and accept, and they will work very hard to ensure that that happens. The Conservatives, despite their criticism of the agreement in the campaign, that was more political and say, I could have done it better rather than I don't agree with the agreement fundamentally. So it will pass in Canada very swiftly. The key question is, how do you deal with Donald Trump going forward? Donald Trump has a different view on alliances and has a different view on managing the North American relationship and certainly global issues. And so the Canadian government will have its hands full as you see a realignment of the international order. And that will be something more than trade that will really affect things.
Right, Stephen, what's your view on this? I mean, do you see relations with the United States change in any significant way? Actually, if we look before the election, it was former President Obama who urged Canadians to re-elect Justin Trudeau.
Well, the United States is an interesting opportunity/problem for all Canadians. I think that we all look at them and say, you know, they're our biggest partner. We share a lot of cultural similarities. We're very, literally very close to them. But we are also very wary that we don't want to be used as a football in whatever games Donald Trump decides to play with the people of the United States. So trying to figure out how we're going to stand with the United States and also stand apart from them is one of the more challenging aspects of Prime Minister Trudeau's new term. And I think that Chrystia Freeland is someone who can handle Canada's interests in this regard, but it is, well, we call it the 900-pound gorilla, and it's right there, and it in some fashion is always going to impact us. And unfortunately, watching the tumult in the United States isn't making Canadians feel particularly comfortable when we put our head down on our pillow.
Very quickly, Eric, something we haven't talked about, and that is the party, the Quebecois.
Yes.
They have got 32 seats. Do you see another call for independence?
No, I don't think so. So the Bloc Quebecois really are the federal analog to the provincial government. What happened in Quebec over the last decade is the hardcore separatist party has really faded, and you've had the growth of what Quebec politics has long needed, which was a conservative party. And I don't say that from a partisan perspective, but for a long time, the choice was between the Liberal Party provincially, who supported the Federation, and the Parti Québécois, which supported separation. And so now it is possible for there to be a shift in control of the legislature that is not putting the question of the relationship with Canada at play. They represent small town, small c conservative values.
And we have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.